I got a quick question first.
Yep.
When did you first touch a guitar?
I mean, that's probably a pretty hard question. I'd say pretty little, because my dad's a musician, and so he had guitars around. I'm sure I touched one in my first few months of being a baby. I'm sure I made my child touch guitar, not made him, but he was. Yeah, so I wouldn't know, but I first started playing guitar probably when I was about 4 years old, and I would make up songs. I had a band called Gaga Guts that I thought was a cool name for a band, and then Lady Gaga kind of stole the name from me. So I'm thinking about legal action, but I don't have much to go on. But yeah, so I used to write songs for my band Gaga Guts and play drums on my pillows, and just kind of, I couldn't really play guitar, but I certainly had the spirit of a guitarist. And then I wrote a song called The Burglar Song. I think I was kind of obsessed with burglars for some reason when I was maybe about 4 or 5, and a song that said, "A burglar came into my house and I got scared. He said he was a nice burglar, and he was a nice burglar. He was supposed to go to jail, but he came to my house, and then he went home and had some lemonade." Anyway, that was my first song.
Pretty cool song.
Better than me.
It's not bad, but anyone can do it.
When was your first time on stage and how many people were there?
I'm not sure. The first time I kind of got given a role to play on stage was when I was about 13, and I kind of, drums I guess was my first passion of instrument, and I went to Vietnam with my father and the Fred Hollows Foundation, who are really amazing. Fred Hollows was a doctor and a scientist that invented a really cheap and easy way to perform cataract surgery, and he'd go to developing countries and teach the local doctors how to do this cataract surgery, and he was a true sort of hero of a doctor, and my father was part of his foundation that he set up, and we went to Vietnam to see the work they were doing over there, and did a bit of exploring, and it was a real formative experience for me, just being in such a different place. And at the end of it, we played a show that was, I think it coincided with a expatriate Australia Day thing that was happening over there, and we did and Dad was like, "Well, there's someone there that was with us that could play bass," and he was like, "Well, you can play drums," and I was like, my first gig, and it was a big sort of outdoor stage, like in that little outdoor festival, and I had to, like, I knew all the songs because I sort of grown up with them, and I was incredibly nervous, but when I got up there, some sort of, zen took me over, and I knew that, you just got to do your best. There's no real mistakes, and like we were saying before, they're human, and it never really gets in the way of the flow of music. It's the sum of all parts. But I had a good show, and I remember just coming off the stage and feeling for the first time that elation of performance and stuff like that. And it was, yeah, definitely, I got the bug for wanting to keep performing.
Have you ever been too nervous to go on stage? If so, what did you do?
I've definitely had some pretty nerve-wracking moments, especially when you do. The weird thing is that when you play really big shows to lots and lots of people, you can't really see faces. It's just like a big mush of people. So in some ways, those shows, as much as you feel really nervous going on stage, they don't really compute as much. And I think sometimes the most nervous I've been is when you play in little rooms where it's really intimate and you're really close to the audience. And so you can see everyone's face and everyone's expectation. And especially when you've got friends in the room. And so you're like, oh, there's Barry and there's Sandra. And oh no, but I often find that just from playing first, from the first moment you start playing a song, and if you really focus on what's important about delivering that song, which is to believe it and believe what you're singing and kind of be in the moment, that overcomes most of the nerves. You always have a little bit, but I think it's healthy to have a bit of nerves. It all makes you play out of your skin.
How did you become a musician?
I guess I always wanted to be a musician. In some ways, I was a pretty adamant and driven young man. You know, I was like, I'm going to be in a band, and you know, I'd seen my family all do it, and I just really believed it. And I think part of it's, you know, it's a really it's an easy thing to do when you're young, is start a band and have that belief, and it's a hard thing to keep that the older you get, because you watch a lot of your friends who are musicians start going, oh, I think I want to just, you know, if you're doing it the way I did, it comes along with a lot of travel and a lot of going away from loved ones, a lot of moving around, a lot of, in some ways, I guess, sort of selfish decisions to sort of follow your dream. And a lot of people drop off from that, which is very understandable. You know, people either start having families, or they decide they want some more security because you don't know when you're going to get, or if you're going to get paid and stuff like that. So it's quite a, you know, it's an amazing job if you can make it work, because it's a passion. So I feel really lucky that I can do it for a living, and it's become my life, and I feel like I will be doing it. The main goal for me is just to be able to keep doing it for the rest of my life. I'm not really worried about having huge success or fame or anything like that. I mean, I'm in a very fortunate position right now, getting to play in Crowded House, because that work was done for me years ago, and I'm getting to play these songs that I feel really passionate about in front of a lot of people who love it. But, you know, the ultimate goal is just to be able to keep making music, because it's such a, I don't know, it's such a cathartic thing to write a song about how you feel and then get to sing that to people. I think it helps you process life and experiences really well. But that was a long answer to your question. But I think it was when I was at high school and I started playing with my band Betcha Duper with my three of my best friends, and we had so much fun together making up songs, and anything felt possible. There was sort of such a spirit in the room when we played. It was loud and it was fun, and then we started to play in front of people, and we did these lot of shows around Auckland, like all ages shows for people of our own age, and there wasn't many young bands doing it at that time. There were a few, but there wasn't that many. So it was kind of awesome to be able to go and put on all ages shows, which I think there's a real lack of in most of the world, really, because it's so fun to go to something and like jump around and go kind of crazy and sing along with songs. So I think that was the moment that I was like, yep, this is for me.
What was the inspiration for your song Burn Up the Road?
I was living in New York, in Brooklyn in New York, and I'd been working really hard on making a record and writing songs, and I was a long way from home, and it was quite hard. You know, it's a really fun place to be because it's so chaotic and there's so much going on. It's just constant, but it's also an incredibly intense place that doesn't slow down, and it's pretty hard to get, you know, calm yourself down. And I think I wrote that song in a bit of almost sort of as you can hear it in the song, kind of almost a bit of a panic, and how sometimes when you can't process everything and you can't really catch a break, you sort of feel like you need to just expel a whole lot of energy, you know, run somewhere. And I used to ride my bicycle around New York, and sometimes, you know, there was this bike track, and late at night when I was riding home from my studio and there'd be no one really around, I could just ride along this bike track as fast as I could. And it was really, I don't know, it was just, it felt therapeutic or something like that. And it always made me feel like I had a bit more control. I think that's the thing about that place, is you don't really feel in control. And that's quite a nerve-wracking thing sometimes. So I guess I wrote that around almost as a confession to my beautiful girlfriend at the time, who's now my partner, and sort of trying to explain why I was being a bit manic.
What instruments can you play, and do you have a favorite?
I can play kind of all the regular traditional band instruments, the guitar, bass, and drums, and keyboards. I like to play a theremin, but I'm not exactly a kind of a traditional theremin player. I'm sort of more of a noisemaker with it. You know, I can give most instruments a go, but I would never claim that I could be good at everything. You know, you feel like if you've got a little bit of musicality in you, you can pick up something, maybe even play it unconventionally and still get a noise out of it good enough for a jam. Like if you can get one note out of something like a cello and you can kind of get one good clean note. If you're in the right key of the jam, that if everyone's playing, you could kind of just go goom, 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 goom. And that was a really good thing I realized when you start jamming with people when you're not in a loud rock band where everyone's trying to play over each other, is that you can be a really valuable member of a band if you actually even just find one note or two notes or a really simple little thing. And playing less is sometimes a really important thing in a band. And that's something I've really discovered now playing guitar in Crowded House, is that I've gone from always being the person that's playing the whole song, or even when I do my own thing, I'm doing loops, I'm constantly playing, constantly singing. But in Crowded House, I have to really sit out and wait until the little part comes in that, you know, when the vocal finishes, and then there's this one part that goes ding 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 ding, and I was like, I've been waiting a whole minute, and then I got to do that. So if you mess that up, you feel really dumb because you're like been waiting the whole time, and you go ding 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 ding. Oh no, the one thing. But luckily, I don't often. No one seems to notice when I mess it up.
This is just a question. If you could change one thing in the world, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a big question. Well, I guess you could answer this a million ways, but I guess I'd like to change the fear of each other. Seems like humans are really afraid of each other because they're different from different places, or they don't understand their lifestyles or their culture and stuff. And so it'd be probably quite an amazing achievement if we could all at least feel comfortable with not understanding each other and not letting it turn into fear of each other.
How long did it take you to write the album Light Sleeper with your dad, and what was the process like?
It took a couple of months, and then we'd finished kind of the main recording of it, and then to finish it, it took probably quite a long time. So I think what quite often happens with me, and I probably think the same for my father, is that you spend the first couple of weeks with someone trying to write a record where you don't have too much pressure. You just go and have a jam, muck around, and we record everything. We've got, you know, a cool home set up, the cool instruments, maybe a drum machine, some guitars going through pedals, a few kind of weird things, you know, synthesizers with guitar pedals and making weird noises and just kind of buzzing each other out and cracking up and going, oh, listen to this sound. And then eventually you kind of find a sound that triggers someone off to have an idea, and you're playing chords over top of it. And then the other one goes, oh, that's cool, and picks up the other guitar or the bass or something and starts playing along. And all of us, and you're recording all this time, and you spend about 20 minutes just kind of mucking around on that theme. And then maybe if you're really organized, you'll try and find another one, like, you know, a second part or something around the same sounds and the same theme. But sometimes we'll even just go back and listen to what we did. And then, you know, quite often there's a lot of editing going on. Obviously, you can still write a song. There's a few songs on that record that we each probably just wrote on our own with a guitar in a room or on a piano. But the stuff that was really collaborative was because we were just jamming and mucking around and then listening back through things and finding the best 1 minute of the 20-minute jam that we had, and then cutting that out and maybe making a loop out of it so it would, you know, keep going. And then we start singing over it together and seeing where that can go. And songs kind of evolved out of that, really. All my favorite ones all did. And it's, to be honest, that my favorite thing about writing is that it's all a big experiment and there's no right or wrong. So it's quite, you know, it's quite a special thing to be able to just go with what makes you smile or what makes you feel something.
How would I get to where you are, and what advice do you have for young musicians?
Well, I think perseverance is really the key. Obviously, you have to have a bit of natural talent in music and stuff, but I think most people who gravitate to wanting to learn music is because it comes somewhat easy to them, or they get something out of it that makes it pure what they're doing. And I think that that's what comes across when you're making music, is authenticity and your intent being really pure about what you're trying to communicate via an instrument or a song or singing or something like that. And that's a really huge part of it, especially in the early stages. And it's just, I guess, trying to follow your own gut you know, I think your gut instinct is a huge thing in the whole, in everything in life, really, is just trying to go with what your gut says. And it's a hard thing. Sometimes you can lose track of what your gut's saying because it's not a sort of quantifiable thing, but you all know what I mean. You know, sometimes you just have a feeling like, no, I've got to do this, or this is right. And even though someone's doubting me, I know this is right. And I think that it happens all the way through making music, and there'll be people that, you know, may not understand what you do, but if you really believe in it and you get a lot of joy out of it, chances are there's other people out there that will really like what you do too and hear music the way you hear music. So I think once you start doing it, and once you sort of, if you start becoming ambitious with it, it's just really persevering and not worrying about little pitfalls or little, like, you know, moments where you feel like, oh, what is it all for? As long as you're still enjoying making the music, then you just got to persevere and know that, you know, the more you can get out in front of people. Obviously playing live is a really important thing, because that's how someone could hear your recording and go, oh yeah, that sounds nice, and not really think about it. But when you see someone perform, you know, that connection is sometimes made, and that's what can make people go, oh, I'm going to go and buy your record, or I'm going to definitely come along to your show next time you're in town. And that's how you sort of form a really genuine fan base. And, you know, so much of it, I think, is luck, because some people just, who are so talented and so amazing and have people that really believe in them, just never kind of catch a break. And nobody really knows how to explain that. You just hope that you meet good people along the way, other good musicians. And, you know, it's a constantly evolving thing. The thing you're doing for the first 5 years might end up not going anywhere, but through that experience, you meet someone else that you really get along with musically, and you start a new group, and then all of a sudden the stars line up, and a manager comes along and wants to help you, and someone gets you in front of a record company who says, oh yeah, we'd like to help you make a record, or something like that. I mean, that's kind of the old fashioned way. You don't really have to do that anymore, which I think is good. You know, obviously things like SoundCloud are really handy, putting your music up on things. I think that's a huge way that young people are getting discovered. So it comes down to that persistence and you know, just keep doing it. And if you enjoy it, nothing will stand in your way if you enjoy it.
If you could change one thing in your music career, what would it be?
In my music career? I don't know. I'm not really one to linger on what ifs and stuff like that. I mean, I've definitely made some terrible decisions in my time. I've had a couple of really bad managers that have made bad decisions on my behalf and that I didn't know about, and things like that. But every one of those experiences I learned from and made me the person I am today. And so I'm kind of, you know, I'm pretty happy with how things are, and I still get to, you know, to make my own music, and I get to make music with my family, which feels increasingly a more and more special experience that I'm getting to have. That's, you know, unique. Not many people get to. I've done a tour when we released Light Sleeper. We did a tour of the UK and Europe where it was just me and my brother and my mum and my father on stage, the four of us. And it was a pretty special thing to look across the stage and just to see my whole family. And we were really, you know, rocking band. It was great. I was like, this is such a unique thing. I never thought I'd, you know, I've never seen another family of four up there doing their thing. So that, you know, I really treasure those sort of things now. I think when I was younger, I probably would have been a little bit more like, oh, I don't want to be in a band with my mum and dad, you know, but you get over that the older you get, and you realize that, you know, uniqueness is what is, you know, you got to go with what is true and unique to your experience.
What was it like growing up in a musical house, and what were the pros and cons?
Well, obviously the pros were that I got exposure to a lot of instruments and encouraged to make music. You know, I don't think my father and uncle were never really like, you should do this or you should be a musician too. They probably would have been quite happy if I'd taken an interest in something else, but because they saw how interested I was in writing songs and playing, it was great to have that encouragement. And I suppose I had, you know, a lot of privileges to be able to have access to things that some people don't have, you know, and I was always really aware of that. but I also worked really, really hard. Like I just, you know, I really believed in what I wanted to do, and I didn't want it to be handed to me on a plate. You know, I wanted to go through the experience in the hard yards with my band, and we spent 10,000 hours in our van driving long distances to play shows, and we worked, you know, 16-hour days and recording music and writing songs, and we really put in the hard yards. But I guess the only cons attached would possibly be sort of preconception or expectation from other people, you know, like people that don't know you, and especially if people are a bit insecure or feel a bit jealous of, you know, seeing on somebody's sons making music, and it's easy to be cynical about people, not just people who are children of musicians, but, you know, there's a lot of cynicism out there anyway in music and art and all kinds of things. So there's always someone trying to drag you down or making an unfair assumption about how, oh, it must be so easy for them or something like that. But at the end of the day, it all balances itself out. And like I said, that's my unique experience, and I don't know any different. I've grown up in a, you know, a very fortunate position where I really like my father's music, and I like my uncle's music, and I've never sort of, there might have been even an expectation that I might be like, go and make, you know, doom metal or something completely different, you know, and be like, no, I don't like Crowded House, you know, make some. I mean, haven't been far off at certain points, but yeah, no, it's a good happy family. We still have our moments, you know. When you're in a band, you're in each other's faces a lot. So, you know, and bands have arguments and stuff like that. They're like relationships. And so it's quite strange when you're having a little face off with your father about a musical idea, and you're like, no, I'm right. And you're like, no, I think I'm right, Dad. And they're like, no, sit down, son. You know, probably make a good reality TV show.
Yeah. What's your favorite country that you've visited and why?
I really like, I really love Spain. I think that's a place that I could spend a lot of time. I just think there's a part of their lifestyle and they have late nights and they sleep in a bit, and then they have a siesta in the day after lunch. It's a very kind of relaxed and kind of quite different sort of society, really. What I really like how nighttime, when you walk around, there's all these sort of little, you know, areas have their own little squares, I suppose, town squares, where, you know, on the weekend people just go and hang out late into the evening, and there's old men playing chess, and there's kids running around kicking footballs, and there's just a really cool community vibe about that. So yeah, and I love the food in Spain as well.
Now I want to go to Spain.
Yeah, same.
Well, you'll be able to do it one day. It's made travel recently pretty hard, isn't it? But it seems like, fingers crossed, it's all coming back closer to what was normal.
Yeah.
Who's your favorite musical artist that's not you
Um,
or your family?
I really love, there's a few different, I mean, I grew up really loving the Beatles, and that had a huge effect on me, like a lot of people in the world. And I'm not sure whether the Beatles have as much effect on young people these days. That new documentary that came out might have replenished their mana or something. But that was a huge thing for me when I was a teenager, was discovering all those Beatles albums. And I really love Neil Young as an artist, and he plays guitar in a really cool, you know, emotional way. He's not fancy, but he just really, he can make one note mean more than 12 notes. You know, he's got soul. And I also really love Marvin Gaye, and I love all the later recordings of Marvin Gaye's music, where it's like, it's just got the coolest grooves in music. Really cool. Like, these bands were all playing live in a room together, and it just sounds like somewhere where you'd like to be.
What is it like to go on tour, and what are the best and worst things about it?
Well, this experience of touring is unlike any I've ever had, in the sense that this whole bubble situation and stuff. So it's hard to know whether I should answer it in my current situation or how it used to be. But obviously the best thing about going on tour is getting to play the shows, getting to get up in front of people and make that connection and see smiles on people's faces in the audience. And it feels like the best job in the world when you get to do that. And I guess the worst thing about it is, well, at the moment, just being away from my family and stuff and really missing them. Obviously, a lot of the travel can be quite tiring. And even though sometimes it feels like you do a whole lot of nothing on the road because you're sort of waiting to do the show and there's a lot of waiting around, it kind of can make you quite exhausted. So you sort of have to keep up a good routine of getting a bit of exercise and looking after yourself and not letting yourself eat too much, service station food. I think this becomes more apparent the older you get as well. You can't eat a pie every day. And, when you tour places like the US and Europe and stuff, you sometimes go and drive for like 10 hours. And so you get up at 7 a.m. straight into the van. You're all really tired and everyone's sits in the van. You drive for 10 hours. At 5 p.m. you turn up at the sound check and you load all your gear in. So there's your exercise for the day. So that's good. And you're picking, loading all your equipment in. And then you set up and you do a sound check and then you have some food quickly and then the doors open and people come in and then the excitement's there and you have a beer or whatever you're into, water, Gatorade. And then you get up on stage and do your thing. And it's all that work. It's just for that 2 hours or 1.5 hours on stage. And so you really have to make the most of that, because when you finish, it's like, all right, pack it all down again. And maybe you meet some nice people. That's always a really good part of touring is meeting interesting people and stuff like that. And then you load all the stuff back in the van, head to a motel on the outskirts of town, and then wake up again 7 a.m., another 10-hour drive. Got to get there. I need to wee. No, hold it. No, it's not really like that. You always stop for someone who needs to wee.
Which musicians did you look up to growing up?
I really loved a band in my late teens. When I was in Betchduben with my friends, we got really into a band called Fugazi, who were from Washington, D.C. In the States. And they were a punk band. And they were never really that famous, but in a cult way, they are very, very influential. And they would play quite big shows, but they were very, very like anti the kind of industry, and they did everything themselves. And I think that was what we were really inspired by, was that they kind of started the whole DIY thing of, they had their own record label. They didn't have any corporate ties to anyone. They relied on their own hard work, and they would put on their own shows that were often all ages shows, and they made the tickets very affordable to people. So it wasn't discriminating between who could afford a ticket. So they would fill up these big, community halls and basketball halls and stuff like that. And they also they weren't really into the whole, showy thing. They didn't have like fancy lights or anything. They just turn on the lights or whatever was available that was there. And it was just really spirited and having a good time. And I think that really appealed to us. It's like, we don't need anyone to help us. We'll just go out and, play directly for people. But it's outside of the States where there's actually enough people to make that sort of thing work. It's pretty hard to do that. And you start realizing that there is an industry for a reason, and there's these things put in place to help you. So it's quite hard to pull off what Fugazi pulled off. But I guess now actually in a different way, people are using things like SoundCloud and stuff to kind of circumvent the industry. And that's kind of what I was doing. Twitch was I felt like that was a lot more direct to people. All of a sudden someone could stumble upon you online, and they've never heard of you, but all of a sudden they're watching you on Twitch, and they go and research you. And there was no like record company or anything trying to manipulate anyone to like getting into your music. So, it's probably a bit of a overly sort of glorified way to make music, sort of out of the industry. But at the end of the day, I'm playing in these big stadiums, and Live Nation is the promoter. So there is a reason why you end up going the traditional routes.
Okay. So if you come back to New Zealand, can we have, and you do a concert, can we have some free tickets?
If we come to Hamilton, sure.
Yep.
No problem.
'Cause, watching.
If you don't ask, you don't get. So good on you.
Huge thanks to you. It would be a bit more, well, thanks for inspiring us. It's quite inspiring to see you in person, and being able to talk to you is really cool. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I'm really flattered that you've learnt my songs, and I really love those videos that Lockie sent. So thanks so much, and keep it up. I think you guys are going to be great musicians. So sounding good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for spending some time with us. We know you're very busy, and all
Very
the
busy man.
what's that?
Very busy man.
Yeah, and all the best for the rest of your tour. And your
Thank
travel.
you. All right. Take care. Look after
Thank you so
yourselves.
much.
Bye.
All right. See ya.
Yeah.